The spiritual awakening process generally begins with a sense of longing that rises from deep within and calls to us like a faint whisper. Whilst it starts off faint, it gradually grows stronger and much more difficult to ignore. This longing is the voice of spirit beckoning the ego personality, which we are identified with, back into union with its will. The problem is that when most of us first receive this faint whisper from spirit, we are disembodied and stuck up in the head, and therefore it does not successfully capture our attention. Or if it does, we either ignore it or mistake it for something else, as we are attempting to interpret it through the programmed and distorted lens of the ego personality. For example, we may interpret it to be a longing to obtain more ego-based desires that the cult has programmed into our mind, such as obtaining more money and popularity, a different shaped body, a new job, or a new relationship, just to name a few. The problem is that by solely pursuing and identifying with these types of goals and desires, we become more deeply entrenched within the will of the ego personality, and we move further away from spirit. Spirit, however, patiently awaits its chance to capture our attention once again, and its opportunity normally arises in times when we are experiencing intense emotional states such as sadness, grief, and depression, or when we become either sick or burned out. This is because it is only in these states that our identification with and attachment to the ego personality tends to soften, which provides us with a short reprieve from the endless distractions of the external world. As a result, little cracks in the emotional armor our ego personality has developed begin to appear, and through these cracks, the longing voice of spirit again begins to call. Ideally, this time we have learned from our past mistakes of solely chasing ego-based desires and instead interpret the longing voice of spirit more accurately. If this is the case, we may then feel inspired to begin pursuing goals of a deeper and more spiritual nature. These may include embarking on spiritual embodiment, healing old wounds and relationships, exploring traditional shamanic healing modalities, improving our health and fitness, moving into a career that is more exciting and nurturing for our soul, and researching esoteric and spiritual knowledge. Although, if we again misinterpret the longing call from spirit, it does not mean that we have failed. It just means our attachment to the ego personality is still too strong for spirit to effectively penetrate through with enough strength and clarity. This is when spirit will help us break down any remaining barriers by attracting into our lives powerful but often painful experiences which may trigger deep personal suffering. Our personal suffering, if powerful enough, will initiate stage 2 of disillusionment. Disillusionment is the process whereby our ego-based barriers that were previously blocking our connection with spirit begin to break down. This forces us to start questioning and challenging all of the rigid values and beliefs of the ego personality that we had previously identified with, as well as causing us to question where these values and beliefs originated from. It is from this point we first begin considering the possibility that we have been deceived and lied to, which causes us to begin to scrutinize the nature of the world we've been raised in. This allows us to begin developing higher levels of discernment and critical thinking, which are important skills that will hold us in very good stead as our awakening progresses. Disillusionment is often a painful process, for everything that is false within us begins to break down. People may even think that we are having a mental or emotional breakdown, which in a sense is true, but not in a negative sense, for what is actually breaking down is everything within us that is false. At this stage, we may feel like we might not even make it out alive, and again, in a sense this is also true, for the ego personality does indeed begin to die, or at least our attachment to it begins to die, and because we have been so identified with this false part of ourselves, it feels as if we are dying with it. For this reason, many people cling to their old false illusions and beliefs and refuse to let go. The key in this stage is to let go and surrender to the process, no matter how painful or messy it is. For when we do this, we eventually realize that we were not truly dying, but were being reborn, and that our suffering was just an initiation into higher states of being. As we progress through our disillusionment process and gradually become more spiritually embodied, we find that we become filled with new insights and a vastly expanded awareness. This may sound like an entirely positive outcome, but our new awareness can also reveal things to us that we might not be ready to confront. This is because when we are identified with the ego personality, we tend to view ourselves and the world through a lens of wishful thinking and delusion, whereas the expanded and more objective awareness of spirit allows us to see ourselves and the world exactly as we are, with all of our light but also all of our darkness, as we realize the horrifying situation we find ourselves in and the immense amount of programming and manipulation that has been heaped upon us from birth. We also begin to see clearly how our entire lives have been built upon a foundation of ego-based ambitions and the pain and destruction that this has caused both to ourselves and to others. This can cause us to feel quite shocked, and to make this even more difficult is the fact that nearly everyone around us is still asleep and hypnotized. All of this must be confronted as part of the spiritual embodiment process, as anything based upon lies and illusion will block our progress. What we also discover in this stage that to spiritually awaken is one thing, but to form a strong and unbreakable connection with spirit requires a huge amount of self-work. This is because absolutely everything that is blocking this connection must first be healed and removed, and for some of us, the damage caused during our ego-identified slumber may have been great. For example, we may awaken to find ourselves in poor health, holding many traumas, negative programming and limiting beliefs, living solely in our heads, stuck in toxic relationships, suffering from a number of addictions, or having fallen for many of the cult-based traps that we will confront along the way. As a result, this stage of self-work can require many years of focused work, depending on the situation we find ourselves in when we awaken, and in truth, it is a lifelong process. On the other hand, whilst this stage is defined by work, a fact that cannot be overstated, if our commitment to the work is sincere, then our progress becomes unmistakable. This progress is often defined by a sense of joy, peace, presence, calm, gratitude, and a deep connection to the wholeness of nature. We become engulfed by the love of spirit, which gradually washes away the fears and illusions of the ego personality, filling us with energy and a passion for life. Eventually, as we become more spiritually embodied, this becomes our natural state of being.